Even before the idea and concept of evil witches, there were always powerful women in Scotland. Many were seen as healers and wise women. They were consulted on many occasions, whether for illness, future predictions, childbirth, or just to seek the knowledge of the wise. The belief that these women were corrupt evil creatures in league with the very devil himself did not arrive in the country till much later. Yet before that, these wise women were respected, although on many occasions they were also feared. They knew of mystical and arcane matters, not meant for the young or foolish, although it was commonly these groups in particular that stood in awe of the wise women's power, and would often think how this power could benefit their own lives. The man in the Creel. Many years ago, in the land of Kintyre, there stood a small farm named the Bowing Cross. Some believed that it came by this name as it was a place of holy worship, where men would bow down before a cross and dedicate their lives to God. But the version both I and the locals seem to prefer is that it was known as the Falling Cross of Mackay, who was himself a brave Scotsman, and like many others, was very fond of a drink. It was said that this particular farm lay between Mackay's home and the pub, and so most evenings he could be found stumbling along this very road, and it was a rare occasion that he ever made it all the way home, thus naming the cross. Either way, let us get on with the tale. In that very farm there lived a young tailor, who was employed to make clothes for the family and workers. He was a studious man, and worked very hard on the clothes he made, but as was common of the time, he made very little money, so in his off time, he would fish the coast with an old basket creel, in the hope of some extra food and possibly a little more income. The man would always hope for a little more in his life, a little more food or a little extra money, but throughout the years, it seemed that this was not to be. But then on one cold and dark winter's evening, the tailor received a knock at the door of his own little bothy. It was an odd time for anyone to be calling, and most on the farm should have been long in bed. So with some trepidation, the man moved to the door and opened it a crack. It was then he saw a weather-beaten old woman standing in the cold. She told the man that she was travelling and had come to his door to seek lodgings on a very harsh night. The woman looked frail and ragged, and the man's heart went out to her. He quickly invited her in to take a seat by the peat fire. The woman was very thankful and rested by the flames as the man prepared a shaky doon. He then gave his visitor bread and cheese before returning to his own bed. But as the time went on and the fire burned lower, the man could not fall asleep. And laying there, staring at the ceiling, he spied movement from the corner of his eye. The old woman had rose from her bed and went to the man's creel. There she quickly scanned the room, and believing that the man was asleep, began to chant an odd selection of words to a strange and pondersome rhythm. The tailor could not believe his eyes, as the old woman climbed inside the creel, and it began to move with a power of its own. The creel, with the woman inside, began to hop, skip, and jump its way to the door, and before the man could leap from his bed, the woman and the creel set off at a great speed down the road. The man could not conceive of what had just occurred, and chalking it up to tiredness, perhaps nightmares or dreams, he eventually returned to his bed and fell asleep. Later in the evening, the man was awoken as a cold draught of wind buffeted his face, and opening his eyes, he saw the old woman and the creel return. But as the basket skipped through the door, this time it was full to the brim with fish. The tired-looking woman would throw some more peat upon the dwindling flame, and lay down to sleep in her own bed. The tailor was amazed that not only was the woman and the magic creel true, but he now had this wondrous catch of fish. A greedy plan would then be formed within his mind. He now knew this midnight beggar to be a wise woman, and much more than that, he could remember the odd rhythmic words she had used to control the creel. With great haste, the man emptied the fish from the basket and climbed in, while chanting the same strange phrases that the wise woman had uttered earlier. Immediately, the creel began to move, and shot right towards the door, which unfortunately for our tailor was locked. The creel hit the door with a great thud, nearly throwing the terrified man out of the basket. The man and the creel would bash and bang upon the door, but it would not give way, and when the creel seemed to realise this, it shot towards the chimney and began to force itself and the man up the lum. Squeezing and pushing, the creel and the man could not fit, and the basket again changed tack and began to leap all around the bothy, looking for an exit. By this time, the soot-blackened, battered and crushed tailor could take no more, and began to scream loudly for help, for someone to put an end to this horrible ride in the creel. It was then that the old woman woke, and calling out some ancient words, set the creel to rest. The now shaken tailor exited wearily from the creel, and collapsed beside the fire in a deep sleep. In the morning, the man would wake to find that the old woman and the fish had gone, yet the Shaki Doon still lay upon the floor, and he certainly still felt the bruises from his late-night adventure. From that day on, the tailor would never dabble in the mysterious arts again, and would forever be content with what the world had already given him. Thank you for listening, and a special thank you to all my patrons who support these videos and allow me to keep these tales alive. I hope you all enjoyed this short tale as much as I did. It is up there with some of my favourites, as there is not much known about it, and I love the mystery and intrigue that's left for us to fill in. It also seems like a very important lesson to learn. I also wonder if the fish were meant to be a gift to the man for allowing the woman bed and board, although that gift was taken when the man quite rudely used the woman's power. It was said by many locals that from that day onwards, the tailor became known far and wide as Fear na Cliabh, or the man of the creel, or man of the basket, depending on your translation. This tale inspired a great Gaelic poem by the same name, which was often sung to a fast-paced dancing reel to mimic the tailor's unfortunate journey within the creel. It was once said that each and every piper and fiddle player in Kintyre could play at the drop of a hat Fear na Cliabh. There was another version of this tale that was written as the Ballad of the Man in the Creel, in which the farm is located near the famous Campbellton Loch, and the old woman is now the man's wife, who seems to return every night with a creel full of fish. Wondering how one person could catch so many fish, the man pretends to be asleep and spies his wife casting the spell over the creel. Once she returns with the fish and falls asleep, he then attempts the spell for himself, with much the same outcome as the tailor in our tale. The ballad was written sometime after the original tale, and seems to state outright that the powers of the wife were the powers of the devil, and the moral of the tale is to never have any dealings with the devil or his evil works. But I must say that I prefer the original. There's another poem or song that is often confused with this one, called the Keach in the Creel, or the Catch in the Creel, but I believe that is only due to the name, as the tales are very different. But let me know if you would like to hear the story of two lovers and the Keach in the Creel. But until then, I will leave you with these words from the original Fear na Cliabh. Behold the sprightly tailor bled, creeping in the creelman, and in midnight got out of bed to dance a merry reelman. The door was barret, went on a spree, preventing much vexation, for he'd be drowned in the sea for want of navigation. Slange va,